Hi everyone, it's me Sir JP, and welcome to our second episode of our free online lecture series for Introduction to Philosophy for Senior High School. This is part of my advocacy to reach senior high school students, especially now that we are transitioning to online and distance learning. During our previous episode, we discussed about philosophy as a branch of science, and we learned about arguments and its truthfulness, validity, and soundness. Today, we shall be dealing with Unit 2, which talks about the evolution of philosophy from the ancient era. It was discussed previously that the biggest and most simplest slice we could do to discuss philosophy is by geographical means. We shall be dealing with philosophy introduced in both Western and Eastern parts of the globe. Philosophy's quest began in ancient Greece 624 years before the birth of Christ, also known as the BCE or the Before Common Era. This period shall be known as the Pre-Socratic period, notable with the presence of great thinkers before the legendary Socrates and some other philosophers who also expounded on earlier knowledge. Long before this period, people believed in the power of gods and their respective mythological beliefs. Pre-Socratic philosophers rejected these traditional mythological explanations and chose rational explanations. These philosophers looked for universal principles to explain the existence and reality of nature. The Socratic period is characterized by this famous philosopher Socrates, who developed a system of critical reasoning in order to work out how to live properly and tell the difference between what is right and what is wrong. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, Socrates pioneered dialectical reasoning, metaphysics, and ethics as a field. The Socratic period also includes Socrates' student Plato and Plato's student Aristotle. As early as this era, we could already say that teaching is a noble profession, a noble job, because we get to pay forward and become stewards of academic excellence to others, most especially our students. Who is Socrates anyway? Here is a quick video.
Who was Socrates? Though known as one of the most influential thinkers of all time, Socrates never wrote down a single word. So in reality, all we know about him is what others tell us. Most famously, Socrates is a figure in Plato's dialogues, where, among other things, he is depicted as short, fat, and ugly, wears dirty togas, doesn't have a job to support his wife and kids, doesn't participate in Athens' political life, and doesn't care about his social status. But it's also said of him that he could stay up all night without feeling tired the next day, could drink anyone under the table without getting drunk, and is seemingly impervious to heat and cold. A total dreamboat indeed. Yes, according to Plato, Socrates is a seemingly superhuman individual who cares only about asking questions about moral knowledge. It all started when the oracle at Delphi declared that no one was wiser than Socrates. Puzzled by this claim, Socrates set about testing the riddle by seeking out knowledge from people who claimed to have it. But while the people thought they had good answers, Socrates' cross-examination showed them they were wrong. This, of course, made them look like fools, which made a lot of people in Athens hate him. In the end, Socrates decided that he was wise. At least he knew that he didn't know. You would think Socrates might have backed off at this point, but he didn't. Even in the face of a death sentence, he refused to stop philosophizing. For Socrates thought fearing unknown things like death was just another way in which we pretend to know, when in fact we don't. Socrates believed he had a responsibility to his fellow Athenians to root out arrogance and ignorance wherever he found it. After all, false beliefs are bad for your health. Think about it like this. If you have a belief that you can safely cross the street, but don't know that an 18-wheeler is bearing down on you, and if you also happen to suffer from hubris, you're not going to listen to someone who tries to tell you to get out of the street. Instead, you'll just walk right into the path of that massive truck and, well, splat. False beliefs influence our actions and degrade our character. And this is what Socrates wanted to prevent. So the next time you think you know something, consider the wisdom of not thinking you know something you don't. Of course, everything we know about Socrates is based on other people's words. So, dear viewer, should we believe that he actually existed, or are his ideas all that matter?
The Socratic period also gave rise to the establishment of various political and philosophical movements. We shall discuss them one by one using a simplified version. Don't worry, because we will discuss it in depth in the succeeding episodes. We have the first philosophical movement for the Socratic period, Cynicism. Cynicism is an attitude characterized by a general distrust of others' motives. Cynics may have a general lack of faith or hope in the human species or other motivated by ambitions, desires, greediness, gratification, materialism, goals, and opinions that is perceived as vain, unobtainable, or ultimately meaningless, and therefore deserving of ridicule or admonishment. In other words, cynicism advocates that the purpose of life is to live a life of virtue in agreement with nature. Live a simple life, free from material possessions. Next one, we have hedonism. Hedonism is the basic argument that maximization of happiness and minimization of pain is important in motivating human behavior. In other words, all actions of humans are driven by the forces of pleasure and pain. According to hedonists, pleasure or happiness is the most important pursuit of mankind and the only thing that is good for an individual. Platonism. Platonism is any philosophy that derives its ultimate inspiration from Plato. Platonism sees the realities both as the causes of the existence of everything in the universe and as giving value and meaning to its contents in general and the life of its inhabitants in particular. Aristotelianism. Aristotelianism, a system of reasoning based on the teachings of the Greek philosopher Aristotle way back 350 years before the Common Era. This school of thought also gives emphasis upon formal deductive logic, upon the concept that reality is a combination of form and matter, and upon investigation of the concrete and what is particular. Furthermore, it also stresses that poetry is an imitation of what is possible in life, and that virtue is the middle between extremes. Sa buhay, hindi pwedeng sobra-sobra. Hindi rin pwedeng kulang. Dapat tama lang. After the Socratic period comes this period where the Persian and Indian philosophy was incorporated in the works of Greek and Roman philosophers. This period shall be known as the Hellenistic period. The Hellenistic period is usually accepted to have begun in 323 BCE with the death of Alexander the Great and ends in 31 BCE with the conquest of the last Hellenistic kingdom by Rome, the Lagid Kingdom of Egypt. During this period, several school of thoughts were established, thereby improving the status of philosophy as a field of science. One of which is Stoicism. Stoicism is the type of philosophy which is good if you are going through real bad times, midlife crisis, or in prison. If you are confined, alone, and mentally tortured, Stoicism brings mental toughness. In other words, Stoicism teaches the development of self-control and fortitude as a means of overcoming emotions. Furthermore, Stoicism is to show complete equanimity in the face of adversity or problems. Discipline is its fundamental action. Mindset and philosophy. All these keeps a person in a routine and making progress towards whatever one is pursuing. The next school of thought is skepticism. It helps scientists to remain objective when performing scientific inquiry and research. It forces them to examine their claims to be sure that there is enough evidence to back them up. In other words, one should refrain from making claims without sufficient and valid evidence. Another Hellenistic movement established during the period is Epicureanism. Epicureanism argued that pleasure was the chief good in life. Hence, Epicurus advocated living in such a way as to derive the greatest amount of pleasure possible during one's lifetime, yet doing so moderately in order to avoid the suffering incurred by overindulgence in such pleasure. It seeks modest pleasures in order to attain tranquility. In the next lessons, ladies and gentlemen, we shall deal with the Roman period, which has been referred to as the period when the Roman Empire fell in the 5th century. Well, that's very quick. That's all for now. I hope you had a good time today. Until next time, it's me, Sir JP. God bless.